But if you look at the global news agencies, you recognize that there are flood issues everywhere, all four corners of the earth. I saw just up to recently Pakistan under some serious strain. So we are not exclusive or strange in that regard. We also go through our issues here in Trinidad and Tobago, and I suspect early warning is paramount and a way to help in terms of mitigating disaster. To give us some details representing the UNDP, in terms of the Community Flood Early Warning Systems Project, we welcome their project manager, Stefan Affonso. He joins me now live on set to get into this most serious discussion because, of course, well, firstly, morning, Stefan.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
For sure. Great to have you. Most important discussion because the reality is we're looking at what's happening not only in Trinidad but across the world. And I would imagine once there is early detection, that could only assist residents to, one, prepare, and two, I would imagine, just help, you know, alleviate some of that stress so folks could just be in the know, as it were. Tell me about this particular project and the full details.
JW, you seem to have all the information, like you're ready to take.
No, I mean, I'm thinking but it only makes sense.
You're
it only makes
right.
sense.
Yes, you're quite right. So the Community Flood Early Warning Systems Project, it's a 2-year project that's funded by the European Commission for Humanitarian Aid Operations. Easier to be referenced as ECHO. We work with a number of partners, Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management, Ministry of Rural Development, Local Government, Tobago Emergency Management Agency, Water Resources Agency, Trinidad and Tobago Met Services, and the early warning system is actually already in place. There's already an early warning system that's in place in the country, and you tend to see it when there's a cap. So whenever there's a flood or some sort of weather system that's approaching Trinidad, you see very often that there's a bulletin on advisory, a warning, and alert that comes out, and that CAP, the Common Alert Protocol, issues a degree, whether it's green, yellow, orange, red, to the severity and the level of impact that is expected. So it's just to say that the early warning aspect or element is already in place, and this project seeks to improve, actually it improves and strengthens that flood and focuses early warning on floods.
I've recognized you all are focusing on 7 communities thus far. Their plans to expand and why the 7 chosen?
So the 7 communities are 5 in Trinidad and 2 in Tobago. So as I mentioned, this project is a 2-year project, and the design for the project actually started 2 years ago. So why these 7 communities? Because these 7 communities have no stream gauges currently in place. So that's one of the criteria, or one of the factors that was used to select the 7 sites.
For those looking on, explain what a stream gauge is.
Sure. So a stream gauge is a simple piece of equipment that monitors the rise and fall of water threshold levels. So this project is focused on riverine flooding, not just flash flooding in streets and areas. That's a different type of equipment and a different. That will be a different project in the future. This is focused on riverine flooding. So the seven areas are Diego Martin, Port of Spain, Cunupia, Couva, and Monkey Town, Papuri. That's for Trinidad. And the 2 areas in Tobago are Crooks River and Bacalet River, which are just north of Scarborough. People will be pretty familiar with it.
What kind of system, what kind of warning system takes place? Let's say, you know, there is, let's say, things are not lining up. Folks, again, I guess this is part of your awareness campaign. But let me find out as it pertains to something really severe. Will there be enough time if indeed this system activates for people to actually take action to really prepare themselves to probably evacuate the particular space?
And I'm glad you mentioned that. So what the equipment does, and I'll get to answering your question, what the equipment does is it validates the information that will be prepared by forecasts that are already actually in place. So under the project, we procured a high-speed computer that's already with Water Resources Agency, and that's to help with flood modeling and flood forecasting. The stream gauges will actually monitor the rise and fall of threshold levels, and the high-speed computer will have different factors and layers of data. So it will include historical data, in addition to, as I mentioned, the 3 or 4 day forecasts. So you know that when it is that you see that you could have, for instance, today is Thursday. We're going to have rain over the weekend, heavier rains on Sunday. That is part of the early warning system that's in place. So to answer your question of if we're going to have enough time, that's the time that we work. That's the time that agencies work with. So when they have a 3 or 4 or 5 day forecast and they see systems in advance, they know, the organizations know, yes, we need to send out the type of warning, whether it's an alert or an advisory or a warning in itself. In addition to that, they know if to start prepositioning assets. So it's not just a matter of individuals, and the individuals get that information through the agencies, and that's the time that they have. That's the lead time. It's not a matter of when it starts to rain, then you get an early warning. Yes, that's part of the project as well, but it's to say that there's more time, there's more lead time than people recognize, and it's not just a matter of it's not just a matter of minutes, seconds, or hours. We actually have that facility where we provide days at a national level.
And based on that, from your particular seat, are you noticing a change in culture? Because, you know, there is this concept in Trinidad, only cricket will come to a pause when there's plenty of rain. People seem to still go about their business. Nah, it won't impact me. God is a Trini, and we'll be all right. Evacuate? Nah, we go, you know, we'll trash it out. What seems to be the new, or at least if there is a new culture, is there a new particular level of seriousness when you assess flood warnings and see what was going on in the last couple of months and years?
There's change. Change is incremental. Human behavior and changing human behavior takes time. But for instance, if I could reference the pending or what we were expecting to be a weather system passing through Trinidad.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago.
A couple of months ago. It was actually June. We were at nearly the end of August, early September.
It's true, yeah.
Time flies. So we noticed that there was a significant change in terms of how people approached it. There was not a laissez-faire, oh, well, let's just wait and see. There were thousands of people who targeted the regional corporations, who went to the regional corporation for sandbags in terms of preparation. On a more long-term basis, the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government provides CERT training. And every time that there's a CERT training cycle that's being run or conducted, there's a very high demand and a very high subscription for the program, because that helps build individual resilience beyond just responding to a flood. It involves search and rescue, it involves basic first aid and CPR, so that people can now be responsible and resilient, and that then has a ripple effect of community and national resilience. So under this project as well, there is that CERT training, community emergency response, and we were able to bring 2 types of training. So community emergency response training and the community hydrological observer training, CHO training. Both training are done, well, one training is done by Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, and that's a CERT. And the CHO training is done by WRA, and we will to bring both together and have both of them, and that's actually the model that's going to be conducted moving forward. So the CHO training helps people to understand weather systems, so if it is that they see weather systems, how it could possibly impact them, but also understand the flow of water, how water should be treated, how riverine flooding should be treated, what are the mechanisms, or what are how do you observe the weather system and how it's going to impact the rivers, and then how that will possibly impact you as a flood. And then how do you respond to it? So basically, how do you prepare, how do you mitigate, how do you respond, and how do you recover? And
in that regard, how does one, in terms of some basic recommendations, because as you mentioned, people are becoming more resilient, more responsible, and that to me is a step in the right direction. But when it comes to what we are currently experiencing, obviously we're still very much in the rainy season. Hurricane season is still here with us. Just some basic recommendations for the audience looking on, so we could have flood mitigation and just be prepared and ready for any eventuality.
Sure. So pay attention to your reliable sources of data. Your reliable sources being Trinidad and Tobago Met Services, Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management, and also get involved. Get involved through Trinidad and Tobago Red Cross, Ministry of Rural Development, Local Government, and their training. The individual, even the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management has their volunteer base, their volunteer corps. Getting involved means that we can be more resilient as individuals and as communities and as a nation.
Well said. And I think we must, continue this conversation, have it as much as possible.
Definitely.